Hey y'all, welcome to Powerhouse Soul, Mat Pilates with Shay. So last time I gave an introduction of the core principles of Pilates. And before we get into the moves, because once again, it's very important to understand the intention behind what you're doing so that you can do these exercises with the proper focus and attention. So, proper positioning is so important in Pilates because it helps with spinal alignment, with um, core activation. It helps ensures that you're focusing on your breathing, and ultimately, it helps to prevent injury and strains and things of that nature. So, I'm sure you all have heard of the old childhood head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Well, I'm going to switch up some of the movements to demonstrate what's important for Pilates. Okay. So, first, your head and your neck. The very first exercise, or one of the typical exercises that's done in some point in Pilates, is the hundreds. And so when you're positioning yourself for the hundreds, and whether you have your legs here or here, what happens is some people have their neck and head kind of hunched over and in a very uncomfortable position. You have to elongate your neck, and as long as you can kind of swing it here, but still be stable, you're fine. So your head and your neck is very important. The other thing that's important in Pilates is the shoulders. So when we're doing positions in the tabletop, so you want to make sure that your arms are directly underneath. But what happens is when people first get in this position or after a few repetitions, they end up here. And what you may hear some of the instructors or teachers say is get your ears out of your shoulders or your shoulders out of your ears. So what does that mean? That means I need to elongate, right? And so that when I elongate, I am not only removing the strain from my head and neck, which we talked about a little while ago, but I'm also activating my core and having proper alignment. The next thing that we want to think about is pelvic stability. Okay. And so let's do an exercise like the one leg circles. Okay. So if you're doing one leg circles, what happens is, and even though we use our hands to anchor, what happens is people get really wobbly here. And so what you'll hear in Pilates is stabilize your pelvic area. And some teachers will even say, act as if there is a magnet underneath, okay, holding it in place. So that between your hands as an anchor and you focusing on that stability, you can move smoothly. Again, it doesn't matter how big your circles are. And in fact, that's one of the strategies. If you feel yourself wobbling, reduce the size of that circle. Remember, form and quality is more important than quantity. So that's very important. Another thing related to the pelvis is the pelvic tilt. Okay. So sometimes in Pilates, if we're doing, for instance, the leg lifts, what happens is people arch their back, right? And so it's different if you're doing some of the stretching moves, like when you do cat cow, you're going to have this kind of action going on. But when we're doing the actual exercises, we're not twerking. So if you have an arch in your back when you're actively doing the movements, what's going to happen? You're going to put the strain on your back. Okay. So no tooting that thing up. Save that for the club or for some party or something. I don't know. And so stabilize in the tabletop position and make sure that there's no overarching of the back, again, to prevent injury. So all of these guidelines are meant to prevent injury and so that you can focus on what's important, your breath, your core. Okay? All right. So remember the head, shoulders, knees, and toes example and think about head and neck, shoulders, core, and pelvis. All right? See y'all next time.